Coming up, a national writer says Georgia may do what the rest of the SEC can't. And another writer says something Florida fans probably won't like. We're going to talk about it all next, right here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to AT&T's SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. Great to have you with us on the program today. We got a busy show coming up for you. We've got Mike Griffith, the current writer for Tennessee's SEC Country site. He's going to be here with us today. We'll also talk to Ben Wolk a little later on as well. A lot going on. A very busy day here on SEC Country Live presented by AT&T.
I cannot wait to get Mike Griffith on the air today because I know he's going to have some hot takes, not only on Tennessee and Bush Jones, but also the Georgia game this weekend. This should be a golden segment.
Yeah, it should be a blast. We'll do all that with Mike Griffith, Benjamin Wolk, and all of you in the comment section here as well. Here today on AT&T's SEC Country Live. Of course, AT&T, proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Before any of that, though, let's dive into all the big news of the day here with our First and 10. And the first item up on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Pretty interesting statement from Pat Forty from Yahoo Sports about the shape of the SEC race as we get ready to finish up the month of September, moving in towards October. The one question I think on everyone's mind, whether you're an Alabama fan or not, is there a serious contender to Alabama in the Southeastern Conference this season? Well, when Pat Forty surveys the scene here in the Southeastern Conference, he only sees one. We'll show you a little snippet here from his recent column at Yahoo Sports where he says, realistically, the only foreseeable serious challenge for the Crimson Tide is Georgia in a potential SEC championship game matchup. But the Bulldogs have to get there first. You might as well advance Alabama to that game now. Now, two things to deal with here. First of all, Forty seems to think there's no competition for Alabama in the SEC West. I want you to talk about that, and I want you to talk about what happens if they get there. Is Georgia the kind of SEC team that could take down the Crimson Tide?
Yeah, first of all, starting with the SEC West, I feel like I go through this every year. I really do, because nobody ever thinks that Alabama is going to be challenged. And if you talk to Alabama fans, obviously they're going to be favored in most of their games. You talk to the writers, Bama's going to wipe the slate with everybody. But every single year, how long has it been now since 2009, since we went undefeated in 2009? Every single year somebody jumps up and beats them. LSU, Auburn, Ole Miss a couple of times, Texas A&M. Somebody always jumps up and is able to beat Alabama in the SEC West. So I'm not ready to send them all the way to Atlanta right now and just say, oh, the SEC West is done. I think Auburn's a good team. I think LSU's got a lot of talent. I think the other teams are scary enough that I'm not ready to advance them yet. Not only that, but I hope Nick Saban's not watching because he would jump down my throat if I was skipping 8 weeks forward and being like, you know what, these are wins all in the same column.
And that's an important thing to remember. Mike's been out of school now for a long time, but Nick Saban still has that coach's pull on Mike here. Saban, if he's tuning in, is like, Mike, that's not the way that I taught you.
Right now, he'd jump all over me if he heard me talking about the SEC championship game here after week 4.
And, Vincent Vallone in the comment section said something kind of interesting. He said, hey, everybody's always trying to hype up some sort of challenger Alabama. The truth is, that's really true. On AT&T SEC Country Live, we're also somewhat guilty of the same thing. I mean, there is an element, and if you're an Alabama fan, I know this is not going to sound the way that you wanted to sound. I don't mean it as a shot. It's really more of a compliment. But Alabama's stranglehold on the SEC does run the risk of being a little bit boring. So if you're a national writer like Pat Forty, if you're a local sort of yacker like me, there is this tendency to say, hey, surely somebody somewhere must be able to compete with Alabama. Otherwise, then what is all of this about? What are we doing? So there is an element of you want to hype somebody up to go out there and do this. Otherwise, there are literally no storylines whatsoever to discuss.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think that's a compliment because I think everybody, when you look around the country, when you look at the writers, when you look at the fan bases, not only from Alabama or Georgia or Auburn, but all the fan bases in the SEC, they're ready for new blood. I mean, they're ready to see somebody new at the top, in my opinion. It's been 3 years running that Alabama has had a stranglehold on the SEC championship crown, and it's been 10 years Nick Saban's had a stranglehold on most of the games that he's played. And so I think that's the reason we have these conversations. You get through week 4, both of these teams look dominant, and all of a sudden you start comparing the two. Can Kirby Smart, the guy who coached under Nick Saban, find Nick Saban in Atlanta and able to knock them off at some point during the year? I think it's going to be a great question to follow.
So 2 real quick points here from me. You mentioned you don't want to write anybody in the West off yet because you've seen Alabama lose games to Ole Miss, games you would not have predicted Alabama to lose, and that's fine. But I want to be very specific about what I said during the offseason that I'm not walking away from yet and haven't walked away from. It's too early to write Auburn here off either. That Saturday after Thanksgiving is still kind of a long way away. There's a lot of football to be played between then. And yes, Auburn did not look as good as maybe Tigers fans would have liked against Georgia Southern and Mercer and those sort of overmatched opponents here in the month of September. But their only loss is still to the defending national champions on the road in a one-score game. I still say Iron Bowl when it happens is for the SEC West, and Auburn's record is good enough to put pressure on Alabama to have to win that game to get to Atlanta. I want that known when it comes to my opinion about Auburn.
I don't blame you either because they are a good team. I mean, you're not going to be the same team in Week 12 that you were in Week 1, and I think they have a ton of time to start to figure themselves out. And let's be honest, too. I mean, Auburn, for every hole that you feel like they have, especially on the offensive line or maybe in the running game, they're still better than two-thirds of the SEC teams. Anybody they're going to face, they're better than two-thirds of the team that they're going to go up against or that's going to be on the schedule. So I'm with you. I'm not ready to write anybody in the SEC West off, specifically Auburn. I think they've improved each week. And I think when you play an Iron Bowl game like that, a rivalry game in a place like Jordan-Hare Stadium in Auburn, anything can happen. I mean, you know it being a Georgia fan that when you go to play Georgia Tech, doesn't matter how good that team is or how good you are or how bad they are, those games are always going to be close.
Oh, in the comment section, Wes Roden says, Georgia's beat 3 nobodies. All of a sudden now they're talking about beating Alabama. First of all, it's not Georgia talking about this. It's Yahoo Sports Pat 40 here. But, I will say that when you look at Georgia right now compared to the rest of the SEC, I do think, Georgia, maybe in Auburn that I just talked about, but Georgia certainly compared to anybody in the SEC East and most of the SEC West, they do have the most legitimate element of conversation here for getting that done. Now, as a Georgia fan, I think you'd feel better about this in 2018 than 2017 when Kirby Smart's brought in another elite recruiting class. But as it stands now, over the last couple of years, Kirby's recruiting has had Georgia looking a lot more like Alabama on the field. I don't think you can deny that.
No, and if you are going to look, the other direction, you're saying Georgia's not worthy of that conversation yet. Who is? I mean, who are we going to talk about that has this resume that you think is dominant of everybody? I mean, Clemson showed some struggles last week. They still have a first-year quarterback. For everything good you feel like Oklahoma's done, they still have some tough games left on the schedule. And when you look within the SEC, specifically the East, you're not going to give it to Florida just yet. You're not going to give it to Tennessee. You're not going to say South Carolina's going to jump up. And Kentucky and Vanderbilt and all those other teams are coming off losses. So this is what we're dealing with right now, and these are the teams we have to look at.
Final point on this subject, Derek Lee Wedlin in the comment section brings up a good point about Georgia. There are only 2 teams in the country right now that have 2 wins over current top 25 ranked teams. Clemson's one, Georgia's the other. So, for the SEC fans who want to kind of drag Georgia down and say you haven't played anybody yet, I mean, you can define what playing someone means any way you want to. If you're going to define it by teams currently ranked in the top 25, then Georgia's played more teams and beaten more teams than most teams in the country have.
I'm right there with you. I don't understand what's the knock on just bringing Georgia into that picture. Now, by no means am I going to sit here and say I feel like Georgia's going to knock off Alabama at the end of the year. That's a conversation that you and I will probably have 15 times between now and then. And obviously we can talk about when that game comes up. But I do think they're in that conversation. I think the brand of defense that they're playing under Kirby Smart right now, with the talent they have and with how good they've looked with Jake Fromm in the backfield, I don't see any reason why they can't make it to Atlanta just like you and I predicted.
Daryl Hamilton says, is Auburn playing basketball players now? We'll talk more about that Auburn scandal later on the show. For now, though, let's do item number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list and look at what another writer said about the Florida Gators here. And if you're a Gators fan, I think there's a chance you may not like this too much. It's Clay Travis writing for his website, OutKickTheCoverage.com, and he's kind of looking at the overall state of the SEC, and he makes a comparison between Florida that I think we made on this show a little bit on yesterday's program. Here's the quote from Clay Travis saying that Jim McElwain's the new Les Miles. You can make a very strong case that Florida should be 0-3 right now. Instead, McElwain keeps Les Milesing it and coming up with wins, obviously referencing Miles' sort of penchant for luck going back to the 2007 season. You can probably add Auburn in 2013 into that recent history of SEC teams that got pretty lucky when they needed to. But in Florida's case, what you've seen from them in 2 SEC wins, is this more about being good or more about being a little lucky?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think Jim McElwain has proven himself to be one of the best game managers in the SEC as far as head coaches go. And I understand that he has his holes. I understand you're going to ask questions about him recruiting or developing quarterbacks or developing an offense. But one thing the guy can do, he can manage the game at the end of the game. He's been able to, time after time, prove that he can go in and win these games when they're one-possession games. And I got this stat yesterday. He's 9-1 in one-score games since he's been at Florida. And I think that says all you need to know about Jim McElwain. You look around at some of the questions you have about Butch Jones or some of the questions you had about Kirby Smart last year in some of those close games, Jim McElwain has proven time and time again that he can win those. When the game is on the line and when it is close, Jim McElwain is good enough as a game manager and a clock manager to be able to pull those games out more often than not.
So you know the thing about the close games, the one-score games. Over time, that will average and even itself out. Take a look at Nick Saban for a moment. I don't know off the top of my head what his record in one-score games are. Most teams don't play him in one-score games, but if you do get Saban into a one-score situation, Alabama has a chance of losing because anybody has a chance of losing when the game gets tied. if McElwain stays at Florida for many more years, 3, 4, 5 more years, that record in one-score games is not going to stay in that sort of 90% win total. It's going to start coming down because when you get into a one-score game situation, you cannot control how that funny ball bounces.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I don't know if it'll stay at 90%. But here's where you have to understand the skew. If he's coaching against Les Miles week in and week out, then maybe it'll correct itself and it'll go to 50-50. But if you have Jim McElwain against Butch Jones at the end of the game coaching, then I think it stays at 90%. If you have Jim McElwain against a guy like Will Muschamp, at the end of the games, I think it stays at 90%. I think it's more about matchups with Jim McElwain and some of these other coaches he's going against. Mark Stoops being the last guy to get it. I think it's more about matchups than it is just Jim McElwain. I think it's about how he matches up against the other coaches.
I'm going to get some comments from Florida fans here in a moment, but I think you're bringing up a good point that Florida's been in big games under Jim McElwain, won the East 2 years in a row. Therefore, they don't wilt under pressure the way that the Kentucky defense did, losing Florida receivers on at least 2 crucial plays on Saturday. I agree with you on that point. Same thing for Tennessee. Butch Jones can't seem to get his teams thinking about big games, approaching a road trip to Florida as a game that Tennessee should be able to win. Therefore, John Kelly doesn't get the ball near the goal line. That's probably not a mistake that Jim McElwain's coaching staff's going to make, I don't think. So at least from that standpoint, I mean, there is some evidence to suggest that McElwain and his assistants do just handle game day better than Mark Stoops, better than Butch Jones. I think it still remains to be seen about Will Muschamp and the staff he's put together at South Carolina. But the other guys, I don't mind you saying that Florida handles game day better than they do.
And listen, you can go back to last year and some of the crazy wins they had, specifically that one out in Baton Rouge. When that game, everything was going against Jim McElwain and the Florida Gators having to go to Baton Rouge and the rescheduled game, and all of a sudden you go down the 1 yard line against probably the best tailback in the SEC, and you hold LSU off on the 1 yard line to win the game. Jim McElwain has just shown an ability to get wins in situations like that more than anybody else has.
All right, David Soderquist in the comment section says the only thing wrong with Florida is they chose the wrong starting quarterback at the beginning of the season. Y'all, I cannot keep up with you Florida fans. I mean, you'll talk about just changing horses in the middle of the race. Go back to the summer on this show. Malik Zaire was the next Heisman Trophy winner. Now Zaire has been completely cast aside. For a while, it was at the expense and the benefit of Felipe Franks, who was the great quarterback coming off the long throw to beat Tennessee. And now Luke Del Rio is the right quarterback for Florida. The one thing we know is Gators fans think they have the right quarterback. They just keep changing their mind from week to week about who that guy is.
And you and I both said when we started the year, if they're going to pick Luke Del Rio to be in that situation to start against Michigan, that they're moving in reverse. That this car has been put in reverse if Luke Del Rio is going back in with the development of Felipe Franks and the development of Malik Zaire. And guess what? Here we are in week 5, and Vanderbilt's coming to town, and you're hoping and praying, if you're a Florida fan, that Luke Del Rio's in the game. And it is interesting because I guess that he just – I don't know if his ceiling's as high as Malik Zaire or Felipe Franks, but he gives you more in certain situations. And it looked to me like last week he really took control over this team.
Mike Mahorta says Malik Davis the real deal at running back. He may be for the Florida Gators. Another comment, Mike Fielding says, hey, the reason why Florida wins all those close games is because they're just playing harder than the other team at the end of games. Now, I don't know if that's true, but the one thing, and for the people who say I never give Florida credit for anything, I'll give Florida credit for something here. There is clearly a culture in place at Florida. Now, you can make some jokes about this if you want after the 9 players are sort of potentially brought up on felony charges here. There's some off-field stuff, and I totally get that. But Florida does believe it can win more so than Tennessee does. And Florida believes it can win more so than Kentucky does. The last 2 weeks are proof of that. When Kentucky got into a spot where it should have beaten Florida, I think Big Blue doubted. When Tennessee got into a spot where it should have beaten Florida, I think Tennessee doubted. Florida does not doubt itself in those spots. And Florida has made a long list of mistakes in these games, but somehow the Gators, the team, the coaches, they do believe in themselves in that spot, and that gives you a chance to win what might be something of a 50-50 game.
Yeah, listen, how many times have we said this? It's not about the X's and the O's, it's about the Jimmies and the Joes, and Florida just seems to have better Jimmies and Joes than Kentucky and Tennessee does right now. They've been able to step up in situations where you're not sure they were going to be able to. And I think time and time again that they've proven that big-time players step up in big-time situations.
All right, we'll talk to Mike Griffith from the SEC Country who covers the Tennessee Vols here in just a few minutes. One of the things that we'll talk about with him is the subject of item number 3 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So let me start by going back to yesterday for a moment. And Butch Jones kind of having what I described as a little bit of a meltdown with the media. The question about Shy Tuttle, one of the top defensive linemen for Tennessee, how did the injury that he's dealing with, how did it occur? And Butch Jones, in the midst of being so upset about that, well, let me let you hear a little bit of what Butch Jones does here.
And I think all of us as human beings have to self-check ourselves. And you may not like that answer, but I'm a father. I have 3 boys. And I think we sometimes got to put ourselves in the role of a parent as well. I understand we all have jobs to do. My expectation as a head football coach, I'm the caretaker of Tennessee football. I'm here to develop and grow a football program, recruit the best possible student athletes to represent the University of Tennessee, and win football games and graduate our players. That's my responsibility. I take that very seriously. But also, I love our kids, and I'm going to protect our players, and I'm going to protect our program. And sometimes the negativity is overwhelming. And if everyone is ball fans, how do we let our opponents use this in the recruiting process with fake news?
All right, that's probably enough of Butch
sometimes
Jones right there. So he kind of goes off on the whole fake news tangent, and you know there was a lot more we could have played. Trust me, we played it for you on yesterday's episode of AT&T SEC Country Live. But for some people, another rant like this is something like the last straw, and for other people, the last straw for him has already occurred. So much so that one Vols fan on Twitter, and I think this is really funny, we'll show you a little snippet of this, is so ready for the Butch Jones replacement job search to start taking place that he made his own video kind of previewing that, and it's a throwback to a sitcom you may have remembered from the 90s. Take a look at this one funny video that one Tennessee fan put together, and if you're a Vols fan, you may sympathize with some of this a little bit.
The dream got broken, seemed like all was lost. What would be the future? Could you pay the cost? You wonder, will there ever be a second time around?
So that's the basic gist of that. The step by step. Did you watch that show when you were growing up?
Yeah, I remember step by step.
I only remembered a little bit, but I love those old school sitcom themes to start. I think those are really cool. So that's apparently how fed up Tennessee fans are with Butch Jones. At least one of them is making a pretty funny sitcom parody deal. I mean, is this done? Is it over? Could Butch Jones still save himself? I mean, is this video in your mind an example of the cast has already been set and there's nothing that Butch Jones can do?
I think it is. And I think the press conference, more so than the video, is I don't think it has a happy ending. I mean, maybe you guys can point to a precedent that's been set from another head coach having an interview like that and having his job questioned and having his play calling and every coaching decision questioned the way Butch Jones has, and then has gone on to have success at places. Because to me, it doesn't have a happy ending, especially when you look at the next 4 games. Their schedule is so middle heavy that he's got to try to escape the next 4 weeks. It's something you and I have been talking about always since the middle of summer, where now they have Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, and Kentucky in the next 4 weeks. At Alabama, at Kentucky. I'm not sure he escapes those games. And we might turn our heads here in a couple weeks and say, where has the season gone? Where has Tennessee gone? And Butch Jones still hasn't gotten any better. I don't see where something good happens after something like this.
So here's the only thing that I'll say. That even though Tennessee fans, based on that video, may be very, very ready for Jones to be gone, I think athletic directors are always going to have a bias in favor of maintaining relationships with coaches because coaching searches are hard. It's very easy for you and me to sit here on this desk and say, Tennessee needs to move on from Butch Jones, and Arkansas needs to move on from Brett Bielema, and so school needs to fire this guy, and on and go. That's easy for us to say. It's also easy for fans to want. But making a coaching change for an AD requires labor. It requires hard work. And so whether Jones should be gone or not is a different discussion. But John Currie, his current boss, is going to err on the side of keeping Jones unless the evidence is overwhelming that he's not the guy for the job.
Yeah, and I tweeted about this a couple times last week. I think where the SEC has gone wrong here in recent years, and you know, Georgia, obviously you feel good about the hire they made and they didn't go down this road, but this is where I feel like the SEC has gone wrong is the Big Ten has hired proven Power 5 coaches. I mean, they've hired Urban Meyer, they've hired James Franklin, they've hired Jim Harbaugh. They've hired some of these proven guys that have come from some of these programs they've had success at. And all of a sudden, everybody's talking about the Big Ten being a great conference. The SEC needs to go find coaches that are proven Power 5 winners. I don't know if it's going to be Chris Peterson, Mike Leach, Chip Kelly, some of those names have got to be thrown around at Tennessee. And if you can't get one of those guys, then to me, you stick with Butch Jones moving forward.
We've got a new wrinkle in a controversial decision made by LSU coach Ed Orgeron. We'll get to that coming up. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. It's AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Before we get to anything else, though, let's do a little more on this Tennessee story. Check in Knoxville, Tennessee, where Mike Griffith, who does a great job covering the Tennessee Vols each and every day for SECCountry.com, joins us here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. And, Mike, a lot to talk to you about. Let me begin, though, with this. We played a little bit of the rant the last 2 days from Butch Jones at yesterday's press conference. All of this starts off because of a couple questions about an injury to Shy Tuttle. Why was there reason to doubt the initial story from Tennessee here in the first place?
Well, I don't know if that's really where it started. I think that was kind of the, where it ended. I think that there's been a growing sense from Butch Jones that there's been a lot of speculation about his job, people talking about that he should be fired. Can we at least wait until Georgia beats Tennessee? I mean, Tennessee is 3-1 right now, and last time I checked, the last couple seasons, Florida and Alabama are the only two schools that have won more games than Tennessee. But everyone does seem to be in a rush to get to that next coach. And, I heard a little bit about what Mike was saying about, hiring a proven Power 5 guy. But how proven was Kirby Smart before he took the Georgia job? I mean, he hadn't really coached as a head coach before. So you got to look at who's out there. Chip Kelly's easy to throw out there until you remember that he had NCAA trouble. And it wasn't so long ago that Tennessee got off probation in 2014. So, there's a lot to think about, as you said, Brandon. I think obviously they would want to err on the side of continuity. You look back at what LSU did last year. They fired a 2-2 coach whose only losses were to top 25 teams. I don't think that Ed Orgeron hire is looking too good right now. There was a lot of speculation about what a great coach Dan Mullen is. I'm hearing crickets now after Georgia kicked his ass in Athens last week. He lost at home to South Alabama last year. Everybody looks better until you put the spotlight on them. How's Jimbo Fisher these days at 0-2 Florida State? So before too many people start making their wishes, they got to look a little bit closer and remember what happened the last time Tennessee went after a big name. Dooley. That was a big name in Georgia, wasn't it? That didn't work out too well here with Derek Dooley. And Lane Kiffin was a violation almost one every month. And now he's on the last breath of his head coaching career in South Florida. So these are crazy times. Twitter and social media are running hot. And honestly, guys, unless you're sitting in Tuscaloosa or you're a Georgia Bulldog fan, I don't know many other SEC schools that are feeling real good about their program right now.
As far as Butch Jones' criticism of the media, it sounds like you think it's justified that some media there in Knoxville is too negative. I mean, is that the case, or are Tennessee media outlets who've kind of criticized Jones, are they just reflecting the opinions of the Vols fan base?
I think it's a sign of the times. I really do. I think there's a lot of negativity everywhere. I mean, I remember last year that a lot of Georgia fans were upset with Kirby Smart. His first year didn't go exactly like everybody wanted. He lost the game to Tennessee at home that he probably shouldn't have lost. Lost to Georgia Tech, too. Still trying to figure that one out. But, it takes time for these programs to get built. It takes a little bit of luck. You got to have some good things happen for you. And lately, luck has not been on Tennessee's side. These injuries are unbelievable. I'm sure the Georgia fans are saying, man, why couldn't we have caught Tennessee in November when Vanderbilt played them with 12 starters out? Instead, they got the top 10 version of Tennessee that started 5-0. And as we sit here, as good as things look for Georgia, talking with Chip Towers yesterday. Look at you guys, got me thinking on that coaching thing already. Talking with Chip Towers, I'm telling, Chip all these reasons why Georgia's going to win. And he said, Mike, I've seen too many Georgia teams that were supposed to win lose to Tennessee. Who knows what's going to be going on in Athens a month from now? Things change so fast in this conference.
I think did we lose Mike there?
I don't think you lost me.
Okay, yeah, no, Mike's still there. Okay, good. So Daniel Robbins in the comment section says it's not the local media that's bashing Butch Jones. It's SEC Country and the social media that's bashing Butch Jones. So maybe he agrees with what you had to say there a little bit, Mike. And I guess just to kind of wrap up our conversation, we'll ask you this, that, I think the point spread for the Tennessee game against Georgia is too big right now. And it's not for me because of Georgia's past so much as it is because, hey, in the SEC, games are never easy to predict. And right now it does seem like Tennessee's got it all going against it. And Georgia, for the moment, has everything going for it. But, Mike, you've been around for a long time. Mike Johnson, I know you have as well. I think this game could be closer than the touchdown on Saturday. Do you agree with that?
No way. No way. I think this could be 3 touchdowns. I don't think Tennessee can stay on the field with Georgia. I thought Georgia's win at Notre Dame was very impressive. I know that Georgia fans took a lot of heat and people made fun of them because they were celebrating beating a team that wasn't good last year. But that was last year. Let me tell you, I've covered plenty of games at Notre Dame. And this Notre Dame team is pretty good. Michigan State found that out Saturday night. And playing in South Bend is no joke, man. That was an impressive win for these Georgia Bulldogs. To me, they're one of only maybe 3 or 4 teams in the country that I believe can stay on the field with Alabama. We've all had a laugh now. Vanderbilt got brought down to reality. A lot of national ate a lot of crow. I think Paul Feinbaum told us it would be decided in the 4th quarter. Dan Wolken, a Vanderbilt graduate, was pumping Vanderbilt so much and comes out with his misery index on Monday, and he leads with 10. He's so mad about Vanderbilt, he leads with Tennessee. But no, man, I think Georgia's for real. I think Georgia wins this game pulling away. Georgia looks as good as they've looked to me since that year that they probably could have, should have beat Alabama and played for a national championship. I think they probably would have won a national championship that year. But no, if I'm a Georgia fan, I'm soaking it in, and I can't wait to get to Neyland Stadium. I'm driving my family. I'm bringing my cousins, my aunt, buying all the tickets, wearing solid red, and knowing that they're going to beat Tennessee by 3 touchdowns or more.
Mike, it's always great to have you here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. Your coverage of the Vols is top-notch. Your personality on our show is always a lot of fun, too. Thanks for being with us. We'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Are you really seeing it being that easy for Georgia on Saturday?
He was a little more optimistic about Georgia than I am because I've been in these situations. These games, you always think they play out a certain way, and you always feel like you have these teams pegged, and it almost never plays out the way you think it is because the environment's hostile. Jake Fromm, like we said yesterday, making his first conference road start. These Tennessee fans are going to be hungry. Butch Jones is going to be scratching and clawing to get back on the right path, get back in the win column, and it's just never as easy as you think it's going to be. Sometimes you go on the road and get punched in the mouth in games like this.
By the way, Charlie Adams, the comment section, said that Butch Jones is doing just fine with the media. He remembered back to Ron Zook's in at Florida when he ran on Frat Row in Gainesville looking for a fist fight. So at least I guess at this point in time, the fact that that Butch Jones not trying to fight frat guys is at least some check in his box, whereas maybe not every SEC coach has been able to have that said about it.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure if Mike actually got my point there at the end when I was talking right before he came on, is that Butch Jones, to me, is a good coach. And I don't want to take away from what Butch Jones is doing. I think Tennessee deserves to have a top-notch program and a top-tier program. But to me, Butch Jones has proven that he can win some of these games. And I don't think you just throw that away that easily. I think that Tennessee, if you're John Kerr, you go out and find a proven winning Power 5 coach to take his place. If you can't, then I think Butch Jones keeps his job.
That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Let's dive back into our first and 10. Item number 4 on our AT&T SEC Country Live first and 10 list. So there was controversy on Saturday in Baton Rouge as LSU coach Ed Orgeron made the decision to play Miles Brennan in the 3rd quarter of a game against Syracuse. He wanted to get Brennan some experience, but Brennan did not exactly put the game on ice for the Tigers. Brennan had to be pulled, and Danny Etling had to be put back in. A lot of folks thought that Orgeron was messing with something that didn't need to be messed with for the Syracuse game, and he's heard criticism ever since then. We've also now heard from LSU quarterback Danny Etling, who has weighed in on the subject. Here's what he had to say about being taken out of the game for Miles Brennan. He says, I just figured we wanted to have 2 quarterbacks ready. Miles is going to play a lot, so I figured they'd put him in, and I'd be ready if I had to go back in there and play. I wasn't too concerned about anything other than us winning the game. So that's Danny Etling, the LSU quarterback. My feeling on this is a little bit complicated. I do think Orgeron needs to get Brennan ready because if he wants to win some games this season, I'm talking about the important games he plays in October and November, I think Brennan gives him a better chance to do that than Danny Etling's probably going to. But why would you play him in the 3rd quarter as opposed to like the 2nd quarter when a lot of backups do play on kind of a planned, scheduled basis? Did you have a problem with Orgeron playing Brennan on Saturday? How do you feel about what Etling has to say about that there, and kind of what do you make of LSU through all?
Yeah, it is definitely an interesting topic, and I actually do have a problem with him playing. And it's not only when it was, but it's how LSU's offense was looking under Danny Etling in the second quarter. They put probably their best drive of the season was at the end of the second quarter, and I know LSU fans will back me up on this. They went all the way down the field. Danny Etling looked like he was hitting people in stride. The running backs were running the ball real tough. The offensive line looked great. You feel good about where they're at. And then all of a sudden, he comes out in the third quarter, and then you take Etling out, and then you put Miles Brennan in, and then he has a good drive, and then they're backed up, and they get a safety, and then he goes out and throws a pick. And all of a sudden, chaos is reigning. And all of a sudden, Ed Orgeron looks like he doesn't know what he's talking about. And I just have so many questions about why then? Why after Danny Etling looked so good and your offense looked like it was hitting its stride, and you could have put Danny Etling out for a couple of more drives in the third quarter to really put this game on ice, why then do you go to Miles Brennan? Because you want him to be meaningful? Well, I'll tell you what's really meaningful is getting the win against the Syracuse team. That's what's meaningful.
And the problem is, Mike, is that LSU can't count on a win against Syracuse, that you actually have to play in the fourth quarter in order to get that win. Because you asked the question, hey, why then for Brennan over Danny Etling? I mean, you may have asked that question rhetorically, but I actually don't think that's a rhetorical question. I think the reason why is because I think Orgeron hopes that Brennan is better than Etling because we've probably seen how good Danny Etling is. That's the why of all this, is that Orgeron's trying to get better by the end of the season. Unfortunately, the reality of now, though, is that LSU has to play the veteran to even beat a Syracuse. I mean, that's the sort of staggering situation right now for LSU. And I'm not going to write them off either after just a few weeks. We don't overreact too much on that. But in the current state of affairs, LSU just isn't that good. You got to be able to beat Syracuse easily, no matter who your quarterback is. But LSU needed the veteran on Saturday, and that's a bad sign, at least for right now.
Well, and that's kind of my point, is that you have a defense that's been struggling, especially the way they looked against Mississippi State. Syracuse is able to put some points up on them. And you seem to be building the lead, and you seem to be building something offensively with Danny Etling, who you've named your starter and said time after time is the guy that's going to start at quarterback for us. And you put Miles Brennan in a situation where it's really tough for him to succeed. I mean, I think he looked good on the good drive. The timing was there, but when you get it on that third drive after the safety, obviously he got a little bit rattled. Both the throws he made in that drive that should have been intercepted were terrible. And I think that a lot of questions are going to continue to come out about Ed Orgeron until he kind of settles into that head coaching job.
Speaking of that, a couple comments here. Chris Couch says Orgeron is terrible, to use the word that you just used. Shannon Burgess, though a big LSU fan, kind of takes the opposite side, saying, hey, it was 3 years too late for getting rid of Les Miles. So apparently Shannon was so tired of Miles that he's willing to kind of enjoy the Orgeron era for right now. But it's guys like Shannon and the other LSU fans who are in our comment section every day. I wonder, is the loyalty they want to show to Orgeron right now, is that already on thin ice? Is Orgeron, who was a very popular guy before games started playing, when you have these shaky coaching decisions and just ugly losses like Mississippi State, does Orgeron run the risk of sort of eroding some of his popularity quickly? I'm not saying hot seat for a guy that's in his first season. That's a season or two down the road at least. But popularity, the loss of it, that comes before you go on the hot seat. Do you think that Orgeron's losing some of that much-needed popularity, which is currency for these coaches?
I don't know if he is. I think LSU fans can answer that better in the comment section. But here's how I kind of looked at the decision and how I kind of justified it for Ed Orgeron. I think Ed Orgeron, specifically after last week against Mississippi State, understands that he's on a short lease. I think that he looks at Miles Brennan, looks at Danny Etling, looks at the upside that Miles Brennan could bring in that program under Matt Canada. And he made that decision in the game this past weekend based on the fact that he has a short lease. Hey, I need to win. It might not be this year, but I need to win at least at the end of this year and going into next year, and Miles Brennan's going to be the guy.
From one unhappy fan base to the other, it's the subject of item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So I thought this was pretty funny on social media. You know that Arkansas has had a rough go of it lately, including the loss to Texas A&M on Saturday. But apparently things have gotten so bad that at least one Arkansas fan's dying wish is to see Brett Bielema get fired. Here's a little thing from social media where this is from a message board where the guy writes in, I'm assuming it's a guy, my ailing grandfather, who's not expected to last for much longer, looked at me after that last play and said, if he's not fired before I die, I'm going to be, well, you can fill in the last word there. Is it really gotten that bad that a dying wish for a Arkansas fan is to see Bielema fired? It's almost like with that stuff, you should have had like the soft, slow music playing. Grandfather, wisdom of the decades on the earth, kind of brings everybody in for what he wants everybody to know about his viewpoint in the world. He's like, Brett Bielema's got to go. I mean, has it gotten that bad in Arkansas?
I don't know if it's gotten that bad. I think it probably has been that bad for a lot of Arkansas fans. And Brett Bielema does a lot of things real nice. He was a proven Power 5 winning coach before he was hired. I will give Arkansas that. And I thought Brett Bielema was the right hire. I still do. I don't know that Arkansas has the same, kind of restrictions or brackets that you do at other jobs. I think that Brett Bielema's done a fine job there. I think he's got to find his footing again. But when you do look at the record, I mean, he is 26-28 at Arkansas. He's 10-23 in the SEC in his time there. They don't seem to have turned a corner. They seem like they've started to get worse under Brett Bielema. And I think he has to find a renewed sense of energy, not only in his team, but in the fan base, if he's going to start to survive this season or next season and on down the road. It just, to me, they've got to start improving at some point, and I don't know when it's going to be.
John Rosado in the comment section was asking when Brett Bielema gets fired. And, you kind of talk about, hey, I thought he was the right hire when he was made because he was a proven head coach. And I agree with you for the most part. The SEC needs more of those proven head coaches. Here's the thing for Bielema, though. If he actually left the SEC and went back to the Midwest, I think he'd start winning again.
Yeah.
If he was coaching in the Big Ten West, where he was in Wisconsin earlier, if he was at Nebraska or somewhere like that, I think he'd be winning, and I think he'd be doing fine. I think he's made for that kind of football in that part of the country. Arkansas needs a coach that can recruit Texas. And if you cannot recruit Texas or Louisiana, and it's hard to get players from Louisiana because LSU gets them all, but if you can't recruit Texas, then get off the field because you've got no chance. Arkansas alone is not going to produce enough players for you to fill a roster. You got to recruit Texas, and you got to at least get a few players from Louisiana. And Brett Bielema's just not getting enough.
Yeah, I'm with you, and it's so funny. That's what I meant when you look at Arkansas. When you look at the standards that have been built for Arkansas, when you look at kind of that coaching position, how you kind of put it on the SEC hierarchy. And we're going to talk about, obviously, Mark Stoops here in a little bit, and we're going to hear from a fan that was very happy with Mark Stoops' performance. And I think it's just so interesting when you look around the SEC that at some places they expect a ton, others they're really happy with the guy they have. And I think when you put Brett Bielema's record against Kentucky or Vanderbilt, they would love him. But I just don't know that he's shown the ability to really get them to new heights there at Arkansas just yet.
All right, so I have a bone to pick with you. I'm actually really upset with you about something.
Oh, no.
I really am. So let me just tell folks who we are, what we're doing, then I'm going to call you on the
Oh, man, this is not good.
That's Mike Johnson.
I don't know what this is.
My name's Brandon Adams. It's AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. We'll also get Benjamin Wolk here in a moment to talk about a controversial day on the plains for Auburn, and we'll get ready for the football game for the Tigers against Mississippi State on Saturday. Before that, though, item number 6 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So a couple examples of just how dominant the Alabama win may have been and was against Vanderbilt on Saturday. Let me show you a quote from Bo Scarborough first, and then I'm going to get to the thing that I'm really upset with you about. Here's the quote from Bo Scarborough about apparently what one Vanderbilt player said to him. I heard one of them guys say, like, he don't even want to play anymore. Now, were you ever on the field for Alabama when someone on the other side said, you know what, I kind of want this game to be over? Because apparently that's what somebody told Bo Scarborough on the field on Saturday.
Yeah, and I don't think, that's sometimes that comes because you're whooping their butt. Other times it becomes, it's a lopsided victory or, it's hot outside. You do hear those things on the field. I can remember, I think we were playing Tennessee Chattanooga one year for homecoming, and they had never been in TV timeouts. The guy was on there. He was like, why are we standing here? What's the deal here? Why are we, I was like, it's a TV timeout. We got to wait for the TV to come back. And he's like, oh, I've never seen that. I don't understand.
If you're playing a team that's never been on TV before,
Yeah.
that's not a game that Alabama ought to be playing.
That's kind of my point.
Can we all at least agree on that?
That's kind of my point. I think it's so funny to get that interesting, that back and forth between players because he didn't understand what was going on. He's like, I don't understand what we're doing standing here this whole time.
But let me get to the point from Saturday's game against Vanderbilt that I'm actually the most upset with you about. So we all had fun this weekend with this piece of video, and it was shared a million times. Even me and the guys and gals that work on the show here, we were even talking about how cool this video is. Watch this little snippet that somebody put online of Alabama linebacker Rashaan Evans coming in and just blowing up on offensive linemen. Shoves him down with both hands and goes on to make the play. I've said before that Rashaan Evans may be the best high school player I ever saw back when he was at Auburn High School in Alabama. This is a cool video and everybody likes it. But you, who is the biggest offensive line homer I have ever seen in my life.
Guilty.
For those of you who think this guy's an Alabama homer, you're missing. You're on the wrong scent. You're on the wrong trail. This guy's not a Bama homer. This guy will stick up for any offensive lineman anywhere. So we're all reacting to this online, and you're like, well, you can see clearly that the offensive lineman got tripped.
He tripped.
Can we not enjoy this video?
No. You have hit the nail on the head so hard right there. If there's anything that competes with my love for Alabama, my alma mater, It's the big men. It's the fat men. You are not going to try to embarrass. It's so easy to point to plays and fat men getting run over by defensive linemen and all that. You're not going to embarrass this guy. He trips on Daron Payne. You can see his foot is on Daron Payne's calf when Rashaan Evans didn't even hit him that hard. I don't even know if Evans' helmet even hit him.
That's what makes it cool.
And he just shoved him.
He shoves him down with his hands. And listen. Can I ask you a simple question?
Sure.
Can something once not just be cool? do you have to be Johnny Football about everything?
No. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to go, have one of our guys stand on your foot over there, and I'm just going to shove you. And we're going to see how cool that is.
But the point is,
and then we're all going to make fun of
me down no matter what. It's a small dude shoving down a big dude that everybody likes.
He tripped. He was going to fall down regardless. He tripped.
Let me bring in Benjamin Wolk on this, who covers Auburn for SECCountry.com. Ben, I know you're with me on this. You're a young guy. You're sharing these memes and GIFs and things on the internet all the time. Mike's ruining this. Everybody loves the idea of Rashaan Evans kind of coming in, blowing up the play, and Mike's going to stick up for the offensive lineman, whose team, by the way, lost 150-0. Can you not agree that the video should stand on its own without Mike having to critique it?
You're putting me in a really bad place here, Brandon. I'm going to side with the big man because I'm smart. I'm not like you. You're sitting right next to him. I'm, 100 miles away, and I'm still a little bit, worried.
That's actually probably a pretty good idea, and I should probably take a page from your book and just also side with him sort of after the fact here right now. Let me move on instead and talk about what's going on at Auburn, and we'll get to this federal deal with the basketball. I'm not quite sure what to make of that. You can help explain that in a moment. Let me start, though, with the football, because I thought that Auburn's win against Missouri, although Missouri is, let's face it, probably terrible, I still thought this game had a chance to be significant for Auburn. Maybe evidence this team's starting to turn the corner here a little bit. I mean, you obviously watched it and followed it more closely than I did. Did you see the same kind of stuff that even against a bad team, maybe Auburn's starting to kind of put it together here a little bit?
It's something offensively that I think Auburn really needed. Like you said, Missouri's not a great football team, probably the worst football team in the SEC, but it's still an SEC team, and Auburn needed the opportunity to get the ball moving offensively against some quality athletes. They hadn't done that, through the first, few weeks of the season. Obviously, they kind of got things going, put up 50 points against Missouri. I think Jarrett Stidham's getting much more comfortable with things. I think coaches alluded to it early on that Jarrett Stidham was going to need to knock some of this rust off early in the season. I think that a lot of people sort of brush it off and said, oh, no, he's a really good quarterback. Things are going to be fine. I think that he needed those learning experiences early in the season. Now, will it translate once Mississippi State comes into town, Ole Miss comes into town, and then when they head to LSU? That remains to be seen. But I think from a momentum and a confidence standpoint, Auburn got exactly what it needed against Missouri.
Still pretty early in the week, and you may not have fully formed your opinion yet, but I think Auburn-Mississippi State on Saturday is a really compelling game. Auburn, by the way, is a huge favorite here, like a double-digit favorite, 10-point favorite, something like that. Mississippi State, who probably is pretty good, is coming off a humiliating defeat at Georgia. Auburn wants to prove that it is rolling here, but Mississippi State's the kind of tough opponent that makes that a little bit difficult. Have you kind of framed how you think this Auburn-Mississippi State game plays out yet?
We just talked with Gus Malzahn earlier today, and he talked about how since 2010, really, there have been a lot of back and forth games between Auburn and Mississippi State. Obviously, last year wasn't that way. Auburn really blew Mississippi State out, and that was when Auburn got on its little 6-game run last year. I think that Georgia sort of set the blueprint a little bit of how to defend Mississippi State. If you can stop the run and really force them to pass. I mean, Nick Fitzgerald, not to say that he's not a good passer, but that's how you want them to beat you. I think that Auburn's defensive front is one of the best in the SEC. I mean, I think that LSU's talent might be a little bit down this year from what we're accustomed to from LSU, which is why you might have seen a 30-7 game like that. Georgia really went after it, didn't allow the run very early and often. Obviously, Auburn's got to click offensively early. Georgia benefited from doing that against Mississippi State, hit a couple big plays early. If Auburn can get clicking offensively, I think that Mississippi State's going to have trouble putting up a lot of points against this Auburn defense. I mean, Auburn doesn't give up many big plays.
Hey, last thing for you, Ben. We kind of joked about this a moment ago, but it's a serious story. Twitter blowing up and social media blowing up today about federal charges for some basketball coaches. We may even have this thing growing over the course of the next few weeks, stemming from some recruiting issues. Auburn kind of mixed up in this. An Auburn assistant, apparently one of the guys that's going to deal with some charges here. What can you tell us about what's going down with this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very serious issue, and I think that it's something that's much more widespread than what is even being reported right now. I mean, I'm interested to see over the next couple of weeks how much this thing really grows. I mean, once the FBI gets involved in an NCAA situation like this, I mean, it's obviously very serious. From Auburn's perspective, Chuck Person was an assistant coach on the staff who has been alleged to be involved in this situation. He's been arrested in this FBI investigation for his involvement with some financial advisors and a few players. Again, as of right now, the extent of what this will mean in terms of NCAA investigations and what it will mean for Auburn's basketball program, and I think it's way too early to diagnose any of that. But I mean, obviously, this is something that is very serious, and it's something that has hit a bunch of big programs: USC, Arizona, Louisville, Auburn, and I think that it could grow even more going forward. Obviously, this is a pretty sleazy situation that a lot of teams have found themselves involved in.
Ben, always great stuff here on AT&T SEC Country Live. We know you're killing it at SECCountry.com as well with your Auburn and Auburn recruiting coverage. Thanks for being with us here on the program today. We'll hopefully look forward to talking to you soon as well.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Good stuff there from Benjamin Wolk. We'll have more on the Auburn story later on in the program as well. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams, AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Let's do item number 7 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And apparently, this Mark Stoops coaches show must be pretty entertaining week to week. Because was it last week we had the video of Toby Keith kind of maybe stumbling onto the set? I don't know. You can decide for yourself based on the video exactly how he got there. But he kind of made some headlines for that. And then this week you also had a fan who, in the midst of what was a pretty embarrassing loss for Kentucky, frankly, against Florida, felt the need to defend Mark Stoops here and got a little emotional doing so. Everything about this video is strange. I want you to watch the whole thing, and then we'll kind of break down everything that's going on here. But this is a pretty classic piece of video. Take a look at this from the Mark Stoops Coaches Show.
Go ahead, Wesley, with your question, please.
I don't have a question for Coach. I just want to tell Coach thank you.
Well,
he came to Kentucky 4 years ago, and all of us Kentucky fans, the only thing we ever asked to do is to compete in football in the SEC. And for the first time in 31 years, on Saturday, we got to watch Kentucky Wildcats have a double-digit lead for 4 quarters. And, that's all we ever asked.
Well, thank you, Wesley.
And so these Kentucky fans talking about fire Mark Stoops hard, kick Nick Case off the team. No, this is what we wanted.
Well, thank you.
This is what we asked for, to compete.
Thank you, Wesley. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. BBN, you can enjoy a free I appreciate you, Wesley. Thank you for your support, and believe me, it's heartfelt.
Listen, what is so funny to me about this video is, and maybe you have to be in media to think this is funny, but independently, Mike, me, everybody who you can't see off camera behind the glass over here, everybody agreed that the funniest part of this video is after this fan lays his heart on the line about how much he loves Bob Stoops, or Mark Stoops, the Kentucky broadcaster who's got his card in his hand just goes right into doing some
this live
card dealership live read, with zero emotion whatsoever. That is the funniest part of that video.
Oh my God, it was so classic, and you can see that it's on his mind. He's like, all right, I got to get this live read in. Probably a producer talking to him, and he's like, all right, BBN, he goes straight. I don't care if this guy's crying on the phone. I don't care what he thinks about Mark Stoops. I got to get this live read in.
Can we see that part one more time? Here's that part one more time.
These Kentucky fans talking about fire Mark Stoops hard, kick Nick Case off the team. No, this is what we wanted.
Well, thank
This is what we asked for, to compete.
Thank you, Wesley. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. BBN, you can enjoy a free
He just goes right into the live read.
He's
I'm
on
not
his
sure
phone.
he's listening.
He's on his phone. He's holding his papers, and I'm telling you, that's his producer on the other end going, you better say that about Big Blue Nation and that car dealership.
Now listen. I want to be as careful as I can be about this because I don't like making fun of fans because it's the passion of SEC fans that gives us a job to do. But how little self-esteem must you have if a good sports moment for you is getting up 10 points in a game where you eventually blew the lead? I mean, that is not a lot of self-esteem.
Well, no, I think it's different for Kentucky. Obviously, they're big in basketball. It's John Calipari. It's Big Blue Nation. And I think he brought up a good point. That's all they've been asked to do. That's all Mark Stoops has asked to do is make us a formidable football team on Saturdays in the fall so that we want to show up and watch the games, not get blown out. And that's exactly what he's done. He's 3-1 this year. He has a good football team. You know, you always wonder what they'd be with Jeff Badette and Boom Williams and those guys back this year. I agree with the fan. I know it's an emotional thing. Like you said, that's why we have jobs and that's why we do what we do. But I'm not sure this is his peak. I think basketball season's his peak. He's emotional over what he's seeing on the football field. I love it, man. I do.
How'd you like a little quarterback controversy?
Oh, here we go.
Let's do that for item number 8 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Kirby Smart, the Georgia coach, said something on Monday I was a little bit surprised by. Now, Jacob Eason did return to practice last week, but what Kirby Smart said yesterday was not what I expected to hear when he was asked, hey, is there a chance that Jacob Eason could play this week? Here's what Kirby had to say.
Correct. Possibly count on Eason. I mean, this is the deal. We don't know. I mean, possibility, yeah. I mean, we're going to bring him out there and see where he is, just like we did last week. We think he's closer because last week he improved as the week went on. We expect the same thing. Now, I'm coming in here after really 3 days off for him because he didn't do anything Friday. Saturday he went out and warmed up some, and then Sunday he didn't do anything. So we'll find out a lot more today based on practice and the reps he's able to take.
Now, I don't think for a second that Eason's healthy enough to play, and if he was healthy enough to play, I don't think he'd play this Saturday. Are you surprised even Kirby Smart even said that? I mean, to me, this feels like total gamesmanship against Butch Jones, which I don't fault Kirby Smart for, but that's what this is about. He's not healthy, and he wouldn't play if he was.
I don't know if it's gamesmanship because I don't know if you get a different look with Jacob Eason in than you do with Jake Fromm. Maybe there's some wrinkles, but it's not like one's a dual-threat guy and one's a pro-style guy. So I don't know if there's a ton of gamesmanship. I think what Kirby's trying to steer away from is getting the questions. I think he's trying to keep this kind of in limbo, in between, so he doesn't have to face the questions ahead up of, hey, is it Jake Fromm or Jake Eastman? Which one's better? Which one's going to lead your team the rest of the year? As much as he can keep that in limbo, I think that's what Kirby's going to do.
And I thought Kirby Smart actually did have a really good answer when he was asked, hey, what are you looking for to decide between these two quarterbacks? The answer that Kirby Smart gave to that I thought was both honest and real and probably accurate as well. Here's a little more from the Georgia coach.
I'll be honest with you. I want the one that gives us the best opportunity to win, to play quarterback. And you say, who is that? Tell me who it is. I can't answer that. It's based on the performance during the week. When you say, how do I look at it? I look at it like Malcolm Parrish. Did anybody notice what Malcolm Parrish did Saturday? Does anybody know? Did y'all count the reps or any of that? Malcolm Parrish was coming off an injury. And I know he plays a different position, but Malcolm Parrish played some on third down. He didn't play the whole time. He was a starter, so why didn't he go out there and start? Well, he wasn't 100%. He was able to do some things, not everything. So I view every position the same, where competition creates and breeds success, and that's what we've sold this program on, is developing competition throughout practice, and it'll continue to be that way at all positions.
Rich Phelps says Fromm right now looks like a lucky rookie capitalizing off good receivers and backs. I'm watching Fromm pretty closely here, Rich. I think Fromm's playing better than that. I think that's why Kirby Smart, what he said is true, that, it is the guy that gives you the best chance of winning. And it may not be Jacob Eason, even though he was the incumbent starter at the beginning of the season. I don't think the Georgia fans ought to be rooting for one guy over the other. I think they ought to be rooting for what Kirby Smart said there, for the best guy to be on the field. And I think right now there's a chance that's either one of these two guys. But for the moment, you're not taking Fromm out of the game.
No, you're not going to take Fromm out of the game. And I agree with you. I think that's what you have to cheer for because, listen, Kirby Smart knows in a flash, we've seen it already this year, that your quarterback who's starting can go down in one play, and it could happen in the first quarter of the Appalachian State game, and all of a sudden you're looking around going, where's our quarterback? So I think it's important for him to keep both these guys locked in, really locked in, and not only just being quarterbacks or backup quarterbacks, but locked into being the starting role and getting starters reps because, like I said, they've got some big games coming around the corner, and if he's not able to hit the ground running with both of these guys, then Georgia's not going to reach their ceiling this year. I think he has to have both of them on board. I think it's a good decision by him.
David Anderson says Kirby Smart was groomed at Alabama. He said that in the comment section, and because he does have the Alabama pedigree, and maybe this is me misevaluating the Alabama situation, but I think that leads Kirby Smart to make less of an emotional decision here between these two quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Nick Saban, he's about choosing that best guy and let's move forward. I don't think that Kirby feels any sort of special loyalty to either one of these two guys right now.
I don't think he does either, and I think it's more than just the pedigree he got at Alabama. I think his game plan ability or his gamesmanship as a head coach comes from Nick Saban because what does Nick Saban not want the quarterback position to do? I've said it a million times. Don't turn the ball over. I think Jake Fromm right now keeps them from turning the ball over. I think that Jacob Eason, for just a little bit, gives you more of a window that he's going to throw an interception and more of a gunslinger mentality. I think Jake Fromm is a little more, he's going to err on the side of being safe. And I think that helps Kirby Smart in his decision-making moving forward.
Item number 9 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Let's go back and talk now for a moment about what Benjamin Wolk was just discussing when it comes to these federal charges for an Auburn assistant coach, Chuck Person, stemming from the investigation into some of the recruiting stuff there. Auburn not the only school dealing with this. A lot of college basketball schools are right now. This thing could bleed over into football because these investigations have been going on now for a couple of years, and there's more stuff to come out. I like what Scott Holston said in the comment section. We started the show by talking about what the biggest threat to Alabama is this season. Scott says the biggest threat to Auburn is going to be the FBI. So I don't know if that's true or not. But I do know this, Mike. I don't think you want the FBI or anybody investigating anything that's a door away from your football program. Now, most Auburn fans probably don't really care what happens to the basketball team, but I don't know that you want federal investigators knocking on doors and opening up drawers that close to the football office. Not because football's got anything to hide, but, hey, you know what? The FBI sniffing around is never a good thing.
No, it's never a good thing, and obviously there's still a ton coming out about this. I've read so many allegations, and there's so many names being thrown around. Adidas is being thrown around, AAU, Louisville is being thrown into the fire with all this. But I have heard a couple of good observations. First of all, when you hired Bruce Pearl at Auburn, you knew he came with some baggage. You knew there was going to be some questions about his decision-making in terms of assistant coaches or players or whatever. I'm not ready to throw Bruce Pearl under the bus. I'm just saying that it gets fishy when you look at the Auburn program. Another one is this. This is not an NCAA deal. It's almost like the FBI didn't trust the NCAA to be able to deal with this appropriately. They were like, hey, you know what? We're not even going to spill this to the NCAA.
Yeah.
We're going to take this from here. We're going to kind of pick this apart. There's going to be fraud charges, corruption charges. We're going to move on to the AAU. We're going to move on to Adidas, all these sports marketing companies, because we don't even trust NCAA to make these types of decisions. Man, this really stinks for a lot of college football programs. It stinks for a lot of these kids, and it stinks for a lot of the people that were doing things the right way.
And listen, I know this is a 99.9999% pro football audience. We're the same way. Trust me, for the most part, we do way majority football coverage. But here's the issue, though. If a basketball coach is facing federal charges, what do you think he wouldn't say to get out of those federal charges? Yeah. These guys know stuff about what's going on, not just at the SEC campus, but all across the country. Trust me. If I was facing federal charges, not only would I sell you down the river, I'd make something up.
Everybody.
I'd make something up to get out of trouble, okay? So you think an assistant basketball coach in the SEC might not potentially turn over on a football coach to get himself out of some trouble here?
I'm all on board with you. And I think what's scary about this is not necessarily the coaches. It is the entire Adidas AAU tie-in, because to me, maybe they've just hit the tip of the iceberg. Maybe they just haven't uncovered some of these guys. And when you start arresting the global marketing guy at Adidas, these AAU coaches, these guys that have these apparel companies, guess what? They're going to want to get their butt out of trouble, and they're going to start flipping on the other coaches that are around the NCAA at some of the programs we haven't heard of yet. We've heard USC, we've heard Arizona, we've heard Oklahoma State, Auburn, and Louisville. Rick Pitino's shocker. They're back in the news for doing something wrong with the basketball program. But like I said, I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think names and teams start to continue to come out that are involved in this.
Let's do item number 10 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And Mike, I think we've reached that portion of the season where not only are some fans cracking up, I think a lot of coaches are kind of falling apart here under the pressure as well. We played Butch Jones a little earlier. He wasn't the only coach to kind of crack under pressure this weekend. Barry Odom, the Missouri coach, he also sort of lost it with the media. And we'll let you watch this and you can decide which meltdown was the better meltdown. Here's the Missouri coach, Barry Odom, at least a little bit of it.
But I got a guy that's the third team left tackle from Rockbridge High School that's got a Twitter account. He's got 12 followers, and he wants to put out how terrible we are. All right? That's the way this society is. That we go and we read and we think, oh my gosh, Missouri football we're this and we're that. We hadn't won yet. All right? But I got a group of guys that went over to the hospital yesterday that took care of a kid. Okay? I'm building the future for this football team and this program.
So Barry Odom losing his mind there as well, upset. Like, where does he get off? Missouri is terrible.
Yeah.
Like what does anybody think he's building? Or maybe more important question than that, what does he think anyone else thinks he's building? Like, who is he to start getting bass in his voice about another blowout loss?
And by the way, this is not Barry Odom that took over after somebody got fired. You're not taking over after Bobby Petrino or Lane Kiffin or some of the other coaching debacles you had around the SEC. You took over for a guy that retired, and you should have hit the ground running because you've seen how this program operates. You've been to the SEC, championship game a couple of times since they've, been in the last 5 years. You know what it looks like. You know what a good football team looks like. And anytime you start talking about what they're going to do off the field, to me, never a good sign about how your football team's going. I feel the same way about this that I did about Butch Jones earlier. These never have happy endings. These kind of stories where these guys go in and kind of talk to the media and say, you know what, we're good off the field. We have 5-star hearts, and we're champions of life, and we're going to do great things 40 years down the road. There's never a happy ending that comes from these press conferences. These guys get fired, and they move on, and they know what good football teams look like, and Missouri's not one of them right now.
Quick final point from me. Somebody told me that Bielema cried on Saturday. You got Barry Odom right there. Butch Jones did what it on Monday. This is all about the pressure of trying to keep a job, right? I mean, trust me, I'd be no different. I'd be in here, throwing computers if I was about to get fired too, I guess. But this is all about the pressure of holding on to a job, right?
I think it is. I think it's also about how you feel about the guys in the locker room, because that coach-player relationship is as close to a father figure as you're going to have, and you really do feel like those guys are your kids, in my opinion. I mean, as much of a stone face as Nick Saban can be, I did look at him as some sort of a father figure, and I think you feel that closest to those kids, and you see the disappointment in the locker room when they do lose a game, when they have worked very hard to try to win. And I think that's what these guys are doing. They're sticking up for their players that have put in all this work.
James Crum said Bielema did cry. We got to try to find that.
No, I haven't seen that yet.
We got to try to find Bielema crying. Yeah. I heard about it. I didn't see it. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. It's AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Okay, we have got one of the funniest champions of life we've had in a while. We'll do that here in a moment to close out the show. Before that, though, speaking of AT&T, let's do our AT&T look ahead and start to look ahead into this Saturday's games. And I got to tell you, I mentioned Auburn and Mississippi State a moment ago. I think that's a juicy game. I think Georgia, Tennessee may be a little closer than some people think. I think Vanderbilt plays better against Florida on Saturday. I haven't seen the number there yet, but I think Vanderbilt probably plays a little better. I think South Carolina, Texas A&M is a pretty good game. Shea Patterson against Alabama. I don't know. I'll at least watch that. 9 p.m. Jeez. How late does that game start?
Oh, man. I don't even want to talk about it.
9 p.m. Eastern time?
I'll be doing the post-game show on the radio, and it starts an hour after the game's over. So I'm going to be trying to take a cup of coffee.
The sun coming up.
Oh, my God. I'm going to need a monster and a cup of coffee for that.
I got to tell you, though, that's not a bad slate.
No, it's not a bad slate.
That's a pretty good slate.
And I'm telling you right now, a lot of people are looking over that Mississippi State-Auburn game being a top 25 game. I really think it tells you a lot about both teams.
Yeah,
I really do. I think you're going to learn a lot about what Auburn is. Really, can they come back and be the Auburn team that you and a lot of people thought they could be this year and really make a lot of noise and go on to Bama?
How about you cover that number on Saturday?
Or is Mississippi State, or are they going to make a statement saying, hey, we really are a lot better football team. I know we looked bad on the road last weekend, but we're going to make a statement this week against Auburn. I think we learned a lot about both of those, not only teams, but head coaches.
All right, I hope I didn't oversell this, and a lot of you have probably already seen this, but this is one of the funniest champions of life we've had in a while. We close out the show each and every day the same way. Butch Jones looking for champions of life, and we're looking for him too. And today we found one from the alma mater of one of our producers, Michael Schlaba, on the other side of the glass. You'll never see him, but he's a Maryland grad, and he had a special gleam in his eye this week when he came in here on Monday, not because his team won, but because apparently the Terrapins won the tailgate. Take a look at this gal from Maryland here, and during a tailgate, takes the beer, catches it first of all, smashes it on her forehead, and then just...
Look at this guy. Look at the look on this guy's face.
This video is so perfect, you almost wonder if it's real. She catches it, smashes it, drinks it all in one shot, and the crowd reactions are all just perfect.
It's so perfect. This is such a perfect little snippet of college, isn't it? I mean, you're standing on the table, you got like this chopped up T-shirt, and this frat guy's going,
when I was in college. That right there did not happen.
Yeah,
is this a real video, or is this like a
no,
stage
this is real.
drama?
This is 100% real. I actually was talking to him about this Saturday. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and it was like, you know what? We might not always win the football games, but we win the tailgates. I love it, man. This is so aggressive. Yeah. Takes the shades off. Has the wherewithal to take the shades off.
She looks like a professional wrestler.
Yeah.
That's like a Stone Cold Steve Austin.
That's
Frankly,
cool.
Stone Cold didn't even do that. That's way better. Hey, thanks for being with us here today on AT&T SEC Country Live. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Give us a rating and review. Make sure to share the show with your friends on Facebook. We'll be back again tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of AT&T SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great day.